I think we
Recording in progress.
And today's 3 o'clock, and today's an exciting day for the Opioid Abatement Authority as we discuss the grant applications that we've received and make the final step in deploying those funds across the Commonwealth. At this moment, I'd like to call the meeting to order. And Tony, it appears that we have a quorum. Am I correct in that?
Yes, sir, we did.
Okay. And I'd like to recognize any guests that we have. I know that we have several representatives from the applicants from the cities and counties, and I'd like to welcome you to the call, and anyone else that's out there today. Anyone else, Tony, that you're aware of that we have guests before us today?
Mr. Spivey is attending. I know he represents many of the client localities, and I see names of folks that some I recognize, some I don't, mostly from our applicant cities and counties.
Right.
We are on deck for awards.
Awesome. Well, we welcome all of you all. This, like I said, this is an exciting day for all of us. A lot of hard work's gone into getting to this day, and we're certainly thrilled that this is just the beginning of the wonderful results that we can have through the Opioid Abatement Authority. At this time, I'd like to take a minute to approve the minutes of the March 21st meeting. They were posted on the OAA website and to the Commonwealth calendar in late March. At this moment, I'll take a motion to approve those minutes.
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
I second. Jim Holland.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. At this time, we'd like to get an update from our executive director. Tony, I'll flip it to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe we have a PowerPoint presentation that's going to be coming up in just a moment. I've asked Charlie if he wouldn't mind driving the PowerPoint, and so he'll be sharing his screen to bring the presentation up. We'll begin with the with a conversation about the status, but let me back up. There's been a lot going on at the authority since the last board meeting. Obviously, I think everybody's here today in particular to hear about the grants, but there's a lot of other business that I wanted to update the board on, and I won't steal Sarah's thunder when it comes to talking about the grants, but there are several items that I'd like to update you on. So Charlie, if you go to the next slide. In March, we transitioned from a formal relationship with Virginia Department of Health to sign an MOU with Department of Behavioral Health and Development Services. DBHDS is providing many of the back office functions to support the Opioid Abatement Authority under that agreement. And so since March 15th, we've transferred all of those business functions, and they include HR functions like recruitment and onboarding, the administration of benefits and coordination of that, as well as our payroll functions. They provide all of our back office financial work, so accounts payable, accounts receivable, all of the actual accounting work that takes place with our budget. They will be the ones wire transferring the awards to the recipients. They've already done that successfully with Washington County, so we have a method in place for making sure that that can happen. And then they coordinate with other state agencies like the Department of Accounts and with the APA. And finally, DBHDS is providing assistance with us in areas like purchasing, risk management, and other back office support functions. That saves us the cost of having staff to handle all of those functions, and I think provides a much better cost benefit relationship for the OAA to have a relationship like that. So that's going well. Charlie, go to the next slide. So the board had authorized a couple of new positions in the recent months. One was a business analyst to assist us with looking at and eventually obtaining the types of software that we need to run the grants system, the grants portal, the system where we track all the performance data, the award data. Right now, we're doing all that on pen and paper and Excel spreadsheets, and it's a bit overwhelming. We have actually advertised that business analyst position, and through DBH, we've gotten more than 30 qualified positions. 30 qualified candidates that have applied for that position. The position was supposed to be taken down from the website today, and Charlie's going to be reviewing those, and we'll be moving to fill that position quickly. The other position that the board recently authorized was a new position, was for a senior accountant. We had asked for this position when we were still connected to VDH, and it appeared that we would need to handle all of our own internal accounting. We feel like the relationship with DBH is different enough and solid enough on the accounting aspect that we don't so much need a senior accountant as we need a person here in the office that can assist us with budget and grant analysis. So really tracking the numbers that we see in the applications, the out-year budget projections from the applicant, the grant applicants, and then reconciling their actual expenses to what was awarded, and making sure that everything's staying on track. And during the March meeting, I told the board that we would not move forward until we had more clarity about the relationship with DBH. And so at this point, we are ready to move forward with advertising for a budget and grant analyst if I sense the concurrence of the board for us to move forward in that direction. I don't think that we need a motion, but if there's any concern, would certainly would be willing to press pause. Otherwise, Mr. Chairman, with the board's concurrence, we'll move forward with filling that position. Finally, last two items. In all the talk about the state budget, something that I think maybe some people didn't realize is that the existing 2-year appropriation that was passed included a pay raise for state employees for fiscal year 24. And the pay raise under the Budget Act applies to all state employees, including those that are in authorities and other state positions that are not under the state Personnel Act. So that would tend to apply to authorities like the OAA. And for that reason, DBH programmed the 5% for the OAA employees, same as all other DBH employees. We didn't know that they had done that until after they did it. They didn't notify us until just a few days ago. And so there's a little bit more information about this in the treasurer's report. We did include in the budget for next year money to cover the statewide pay increases, but ultimately the board is going to have an option to approve that by adopting the budget. If the board would like to move in a different direction, then that is also at the pleasure of the board. But if you take no other action than to adopt the budget, then the compensation increases can continue. And then the final piece under personnel is that we've been fortunate to bring on board 3 interns, 3 college students. We're hoping they may be able to join us at some point during the call. And if they do, we'll try to get them introduced to the board. Next slide, Charlie. So also at the last board meeting, the board provided authority for us to procure a contract for professional services for events planning and management, specifically to build out in-person workshops for the Abatement Academy. We worked with DBH to do a procurement process and interviewed a couple of qualified firms, and ultimately selected Eisenman and Associates, which is located here in Richmond. They're a full service logistics and events management company, and they provide planning and assistance for organizations like the Virginia Association of Counties, VML. They do both of their annual conferences and their regional workshops, as well as the Virginia Association of CSBs. And so many of the members of the board are also members of those organizations. We feel like there's a really good synergy there. They turned in a really nicely done proposal at the more competitive price than the other firm. Their price for managing all of the events that we have planned this year, which includes 4 in-person workshops, was a package price of $30,150, which brought us in under the board's authorized not to exceed amount of $35,000. So we've executed that contract, and we're actively working with them right now to plan the workshops that are going to begin in September. And we'll provide more information about those workshops in a moment. Next slide, Charlie. The other contract that the board authorized us to move forward with was really for a marketing company for communications and branding assistance. We went onto the state website and identified existing contracts and asked for quotes and selected a vendor Again, it's located here in Richmond, called Pixel Strike Creative LLC, and they're a full-service branding company. They do website and print development and that sort of thing. And they offered us a startup business package or a branding package at a cost of $3,500. It included a couple of lengthy branding workshops where they get us together and they ask questions about who are our customers, who are the stakeholders, what's the culture of the organization, what are we trying to achieve with the work that we're doing, and develop a thing called a mood board. I tried to tell them that there's not much being bored going on at the Opioid Abatement Authority, but apparently I had the wrong kind of board in mind. But these are design concepts that, if they were here talking to you, they could explain all this to you better than I can. But this is a process that they go through to come up with things like colors that have the right effect on people visually, that the right type of font that appeal to our audience and to our stakeholders and customers, and all of that sort of thing. And they use this to develop things like logos, brands, web design pages to help us put a little bit of polish on our reports to develop business cards, letterhead, all that type of thing. None of which we have. We don't have business cards yet. We don't have letterhead yet, because we didn't want to spend money on those things when we don't really even have a logo yet, and then have to go back later and reprint it. And so they've done all of that for us at the package price of $3,500, which is well below the board's authorization. We can go back to them for additional hourly rate consultation if we need to. Later in the meeting, the board will be asked to consider some possible logo designs, and what you will see are logos that came forward from this effort. Charlie? The other contract, I think this is the last one that the board authorized that we move forward with, is a financial advisor, and specifically to assist the finance committee and then ultimately the full board evaluate some pretty heavy long-term financial strategy questions, specifically around securitization. Again, Department of Behavioral Health helped us with a full procurement. We wrote and published an RFP. We received two responses back, or two proposals that were responsive to our needs, and we put together a selection panel that included Mr. Holland serving as the treasurer, myself, Adam Rosatelli, the director of finance, and James Schlesman, our legal counsel. And we received oral presentations and interviews of both of these firms, and ultimately selected Public Resources Advisory Group, which is located in New York. They'll be providing the board with a finance committee and the board with an evaluation and determination of the feasibility of securitization of settlement funds and recommendations around how that could actually be accomplished. We were very impressed, and I'm happy to yield to the treasurer, to Mr. Holland on this, but they bring 38 years of experience in this field, and they've advised more than 24 states and public bodies since 1997 in securitization efforts that have brought forward $42 billion in securitized funding. And so very well qualified firm from what we can tell, and for a price that we were, I think, actually happily surprised to see that it came in below the board's authorized amount at $75,000. They will also be available to provide us ongoing financial advisory services at an hourly rate, and we of course can negotiate future annual contracts once we have a better sense of exactly what that plan is going to look like. So I'll pause here and ask whether Mr. Holland would like to comment at all about that item.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Tony. I certainly appreciate your putting this forward, and I'm in full agreement. We were very impressed with the firm's experience, expertise, as well as the cost. And I know this will aid our work that we need to do as an authority going forward. So I'm very pleased to recommend approval for that on behalf of the Finance Committee.
All right, thank you, Mr. Holland. Charlie, will you take us to the next slide? I'm just trying to give the board a little bit of a heads up. We're starting to look at potential vendors that could help us begin to build our grants portal. We've built a pretty complex system of entering and then managing all the data connected to these grants using Excel and using Microsoft Word and using the printer. we really need an application that can manage this stuff and create histories of data that we need and begin to build out the data warehouse. I've reported to the board in the past as part of our operational plan and looking out 5 years in advance, the need to utilize a rigorous grants portal. We think the first component of that, it's probably appropriate for us to begin to try to build that out, and if possible, try to get something operational before October when the next round of grants go out. And so just a heads up that we are looking at that. We're building out what we think the scope of requirements would be and looking at vendors that may be able to provide some more or less off-the-shelf systems to get parts of the grant portal up and running. Funding for that is already provided in the recommended budget for FY24. And so certainly I will coordinate with the board, with the chairman before we move forward, but that is something that you may see again here in short order. Charlie? Again, where we are with the budget, the last time that came to the board and asked for the board to approve a budget was in September of last year, about a month after I started in the position. Since that time, the board has authorized additional positions. The board's authorized contracts that were not specifically baked into the September budget. And so it's become necessary to amend the current year budget prior to the end of the fiscal year. The finance committee has looked at what we've put forward to do exactly that. The finance committee also reviewed the proposed budget for the coming fiscal year. And during the treasurer's report, you'll hear an update from Mr. Holland about that. And then we'll ask you during new business to consider approving the finance committee's recommendation to amend the current year budget and to adopt the FY24 budget. Okay. Charlie? So Abatement Academy is something that we've been talking about a lot. This is a good news story, in my opinion. We have I think it's 20 some sessions that have been scheduled between April and the end of the calendar year. And they're broken down under the Johns Hopkins principles. You guys have, I'm sure, recognize the principles of spend money to save lives, use evidence to guide spending, invest in youth prevention, focus on racial equity, and develop a fair and transparent process for deciding where to spend the funding. These are the best practices in the use of opioid settlement funds. And we've broken down the classes that we're offering under each of those principles. The target audience really is potential recipients of OAA funding. So cities, counties, and representatives of state agencies. We've had some really well-attended presentations so far. And I would encourage the board, if you haven't already, to go to the website and click on the tab labeled Abatement Academy. You can see the full schedule of classes. For the webinars that have already been completed, there are videos recorded where you can click and watch the Academy. If you're like me and you're impatient, you can speed it up to 3 times the normal speed so that it only takes 30 minutes instead of an hour, or 20 minutes instead of an hour. And there's also copies of the presentations. We had the biggest attendance yet. Yesterday was a program that Chesterfield County Fire and EMS did to talk about how they respond to people after an overdose and get them into treatment recovery. And we had 74 people physically, or I shouldn't say physically, virtually attending. We had over 200 that had registered. And even though not everyone who registered attended, we have their email. And so we can send them the links and the information so that they can watch the recording afterwards. And so very happy with the way this is going. And this is something that's happening there's no budgetary impact. All of the speakers are giving voluntarily of their time. There's no cost to post this information to the website. And so we're glad that we've been able to get that up and running. Next slide, Charlie. Start to wrap up. I just want to remind members of the board that the RX and Illicit Drug Summit, which is an annual conference in Atlanta each year. It's the largest conference in America and one of the largest conferences in the world that deals with issues related to addiction, prevention, treatment, recovery. It's it's part science, it's part exhibition, and part exploration and comparison of what other organizations are doing. You see here some of the folks from the OAA that attended this past year in 2023. The summit has issued out a call for papers for next year, and we're going to be submitting at least 2 topics, probably the gold standard incentive program that the board created, as well as the Abatement Academy, and probably just an overall report from Virginia about how it's going with the distribution of opioid settlement funds. We attended some similar sessions about opioid settlement funds this year and found them to be a little bit generic, and we feel like we can do better. And so any members of the board that are interested in attending, that are interested in submitting papers, I would encourage you to speak with myself, speak with Dr. Thomason. I think Sarah's been to this event a number of times, and we would encourage you to participate. It's a great networking opportunity, great learning opportunity. And so, Mr. Chairman, I would just ask if Dr. Thomason wants to add anything to my comments, or if not, we can just continue on.
Sure, I can just echo what Tony said. I've been to every single one of these summits since it started, except for I think one that I missed. And it was such a great opportunity to be with my fellow members from the board, and then our entire team from the Opioid Abatement Authority, the staff. It was a great learning experience, but it was also a great time for us to fellowship together and really get to know each other and do lots of planning and discussing. So I'll just echo Tony. Any other board members, I really encourage you to go next year. We have a great time. And I can't wait to highlight what we're doing in Virginia.
Thank you. Charlie, I think I've got one more slide. So just to keep these dates in front of the board members, these are some dates that are of significance for members of the board, particularly some of the committee members. In July, on July 28th, we're having a virtual session for the Finance Committee. Now, this is not a noticed meeting where business is going to be conducted. This is just an information session. So we don't have to worry about a quorum or anything like that. Any members of the board, any members of the public are welcome to attend. The purpose of this information session is to allow our selected vendor that's going to be dealing with the securitization issue, PRAG, to Public Resources Advisory Group, to make a presentation about their organization and about the work that they're going to be doing, and to basically present to us about their plan for moving forward. So that'll be on July 28th at 10 o'clock in the morning. August 18th, Grants Committee in Abingdon. This will be an important meeting because we're going to be, the Grants Committee will be considering recommendations from staff for the awards to state agencies. And and I'll kind of step off the agenda here and tell you that the deadline for state agencies to submit proposals for funding was on the 21st of this week. We have $8.2 million budgeted for this coming fiscal year for state agency awards, 8.2 million. And we got about 21 million in requests. And so we're going to have some real work to do between now and August 18th to provide the Grants Committee with a balanced set of recommendations about moving forward. And we'll be sharing that information with the Grants Committee and with the rest of the board as soon as we've had a chance to kind of organize it and pull it all together. September 7th is our first in-person abatement workshop, also in Abingdon. We've got a draft agenda put together that we'll be sharing with the chair here shortly, and working with Eisenman and Associates, our event planning company, to make sure that we've got the logistics in place. And so hopefully board members that are available can attend that as well. October 2nd, Finance Committee, and tentatively scheduled to be in person in Pearisburg, if Delegate Ballard will have us, from 3 to 4 in the afternoon. The next in-person abatement workshop will be in Charlottesville on October 19th. And then the full board meeting will be held in Hot Springs in conjunction with VACO's annual conference. And so VACO negotiates really good deals at the homestead. And so this could be a really good opportunity for our board to interact with members of VACO and with their leadership. Our board meeting will be occurring immediately after the VACO conference ends, kind of like their conference ends at 11, and our conference begins, or our full board meeting begins, just as that conference is ending. I think you'll have a number of people in the audience that were attending the VACO conference who may stay to watch the full board meeting, and we're going to have probably a pretty heavy agenda of items for the board to consider at that meeting. And then the last meeting that we have on the calendar for the year is December 4th for the Grants Committee. By then, we'll have another round of grants to cities and counties for the Grants Committee, hopefully to consider. And Mr. Chairman, I believe that's the end of my report. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions that members of the board may have.
Well, thanks, Tony. That was a lot of information, and we appreciate all the hard work that you and everyone else there in the office have been doing, and as well as everybody on the authority. Does anyone on the authority have any questions for Tony? Well, hearing none, we'll move on now to get an update from the Finance Committee. Mr. Holland.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the authority. This is an exciting day for the authority. I'm very pleased to report that the Finance Committee met on May 1st, 2023, and the Finance Committee received a presentation from Mr. Adam Rosatelli, our Director of Finance, regarding the estimated settlement payments and projected expenses for the OAA. Excuse me, for the OAA. And of course, as we move forward on the slides, you should see a slide. Thank you. This slide provides a breakout of the fiscal year 23 and 24 biennial operating and administrative budget for the OAA by expense category, which totals approximately $74 million over the 2 years. Again, this budget is reflective, and this is very important to note, of the measured approach adopted by this board when we met initially last year to provide a stable source of funding for local cooperative and state agency projects. As depicted in this slide, the amount that's available to be distributed for individual cities, counties, and cooperative projects and state agency awards comprise approximately 95% of the total budget, while the OAA's administrative expenses constitute, very pleased to note, about 5% of the budget, which is what we discussed ongoingly. So I'm very pleased, Mr. Chairman, on behalf of the Finance Committee, to recommend that the full board vote on the amended operating and administrative expense budgets for the OAA for fiscal years 23 and 24. And of course, Adam and Tony mentioned the comments regarding the pay increases as he noted in the budget, and that is reflected as noted by Chapter 2 of the section of the 2022 special session of the Acts of the General Assembly, I should note. So it is my recommendation, therefore, that I recommend approval by the authority at this point. And if there are any questions or comments, we certainly welcome those. But I think the screen is pretty illustrative of our financial operating and outlays.
Thank you, Mr. Holland, for that report. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Holland or for Tony on this budget? Well, hearing none, I certainly am proud that we have kept our administrative expenses, like Mr. Holland said, at around 5%. That was our goal from the beginning, and we're right where we wanted to be. And
Yes.
Making sure that the money is being deployed out into our communities.
Yes.
Not kept there in the office. So I think Mr. Holland has made a motion. Is that correct, Mr. Holland?
Yes, I have made a motion to
this
approve and
amended
adopt.
budget?
Yes.
I second the motion. Joe
All right,
Barron.
Sheriff Barron has seconded the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? Hearing none, we have adopted the amended budget.
Mr. Chairman, I want to give a great shout out to the staff, to Tony and the staff. They've done a tremendous job. I'm very pleased. And I might also add, looking at the numbers very closely, I'm looking at cash flow as well. So I appreciate what Tony provided me as a comfort level regarding cash flow and cash flow analysis. So again, big thank you to everyone in the shop who did a tremendous job. And thank you for your leadership as well.
Well, thank you, Mr. Holland. That's great work, as always by our staff, but thank you for leading the Finance Committee. Up next, we have an update, a very exciting update from Dr. Thomason. Sarah, I know, has been working hard with the Grants Committee, who many of which are on this board, participate in the Grants Committee and have been very active. We're excited about what she's going to tell us today. And Sarah, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I will agree. This is such an exciting day, and I'm so happy to see many of our recipients, applicants that are going to be on the call with us today. So we last held our in-person public meeting 2 weeks ago on Friday, June the 9th in Roanoke, Virginia. And during that meeting, we had a presentation from our Director of Finance, Adam Rosatelli. He provided an analysis of the authority's budget for grants in fiscal year 24 and compared that budget to the recommended awards. And through that analysis, it was demonstrated that the OAA can make all the recommended fiscal year 24 awards within our budget. His analysis also indicated the year 2 through 5 costs connected to the cooperative partnership awards, if fully funded at the requested levels, would require the board to use a portion of the unrestricted budget. And so there was discussion about how the authority will continue to work with our recipients to identify additional funding streams and to ensure that the cooperative partnership projects become financially self-sufficient over time. The committee also received a presentation from Mr. Linticum, who provided a summary of each of the grant applications that was received, along with the recommendations from the staff for those awards. There was a public comment period during time which there were no public comments offered. And after discussion, our committee voted to recommend to the full board the slate of awards that you have been provided and that are on today's agenda under new business. The Grants Committee also voted to recommend to the full board that the OAA open an application period for individual city and county planning grants from the time period of July 1st to September 30th of this year. And the purpose of this is to provide additional opportunity for these cities and counties to develop plans for use of their opioid settlement funds, including their individual OAA funding. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Does anybody have any questions for Dr. Thomason? Quiet group today. Well, hearing none, thank you. And we'll move on to the next agenda item. And that's an update from the Office of the Attorney General regarding the status of the opioid related settlements. I know we've got some new news from them. I think Tom Bashir is here. He's the OAG's Special Assistant Attorney General who focuses on opioid settlement related settlements. And he's going to be providing us with a brief update. And Mr. Bashir.
Yes, thank you for the invitation, for letting me come speak to you today. And thank you for all the good work you're doing to get these funds out into our communities and put them to work on abatement and remediation. It's obviously much needed. I can give you a brief update on the status of the settlements, the various settlements that have been finalized and are in the process of being finalized. And probably the biggest update is since the last summary of the various settlements was provided, we have added some new settlements to the mix. There are 5 settlements, 5 new to us settlements that are now part of the mix. 2 settlements with manufacturers, Allergan and Teva, and 3 settlements with retail pharmacy chains, Walmart, Walgreens, and CVS. I think at the time of the last update, the Walmart, Teva, and Allergan settlements had been announced, but were not yet finalized. And they are still not quite finalized yet. There's still a few procedural steps that have to take place before those settlements are completely finalized and funds actually start flowing from them. But we are a lot closer to that day now than we were at the time of the last update. I believe that everyone should have a copy of an updated summary of the settlements that I prepared and sent to Mr. Schlesman before this, a few days ago before this meeting. I can run through it quickly and focus on just the things that have changed since the last update. Just starting from the top, the settlement with McKinsey and Company, there was a distribution in April of 2000 of this year of $585,373.24 that went to the Opioid Abatement Authority, and there are two more distributions of that amount still to come in April of next year and in 2025. In the distributors and the Janssen settlements, the only thing that's changed since the last time or since the last update is there were distributions from the deficiency fund to the Virginia localities, the Virginia subdivisions. The excess funds that remained in the deficiency fund were distributed per the memorandum of understanding to the directly to the localities. There should be another distribution from the distributor settlement coming up. We anticipate next month. In the case of the Janssen settlement, because the Commonwealth qualified for the highest incentive level in that settlement, the first 4 years worth of payments were accelerated into the first year, and that payment occurred last year. So there won't be any subsequent payments that will result in any distributions to the authority until June of 2026. The settlement with Mallinckrodt, I wanted to touch on this briefly because well, first of all, there was a distribution from that settlement early this year in I believe in January of this year, and that distribution resulted in a little over $1.9 million being transferred to the Opioid Abatement Authority. The settlement, which is part of a bankruptcy reorganization plan, calls for the remaining amounts that are due to the various states, including the Commonwealth, to be paid in distributions over the next 8 years. However, there has been some press about this. You may or may not have seen it. And the upshot is that Mallinckrodt's financial performance has not been what it was hoped to be, and so there was what I'll describe as, for lack of a better word, a trial balloon floated that Mallinckrodt could potentially miss the next payment that it's due to make to the trust that handles the distributions to the states for the opioid settlement. That is still up in the air, for lack of a better word. The trustees have made it clear that they do not or they are not willing to accept a Mallinckrodt missing that payment or skipping a year's payment or anything like that. There are discussions underway with various creditor groups right now to try and resolve the situation. And as soon as I have more information on that, I'll certainly pass it along. But the situation with Mallinckrodt is a bit fluid right now. The new settlements, which have been approved but are awaiting the final steps for finalization, are as I noted before, the Walmart, Teva, Allergan, CVS, and Walgreens settlements. The projected totals that will be that should be flowing into the Commonwealth from those settlements are reflected on the summary that was distributed, and over the life of those settlements should result in approximately $33.6 million flowing from the Walmart settlement to the Opioid Abatement Authority, with the first payment from that settlement probably coming sometime in the next quarter. There's a little bit of uncertainty around that right now, but that's when we anticipated that first distribution being made. From the Teva settlement, we're expecting or projecting a little under $48.6 million from that settlement over flowing to the authority over the life of the settlement, which has a tail that stretches out until 2035. In the Allergan settlement, we're looking at a projection of $26.7 million and change over the life of that settlement, flowing to the authority from now through 2029. In the CVS settlement, it looks like about a little under $59.4 million is projected to flow from that settlement to the authority from now through 2032. And in the Walgreens settlement, there is a projection of about a little under $64.6 million that's projected to flow to the authority over the life of that settlement from now through 2037. Then there are two other settlements that have not yet been finalized because they're in various stages of proceedings in bankruptcy court. Those are the settlements with Purdue Pharma and Endo. The Purdue Pharma settlement was the bankruptcy court in that case had approved the reorganization plan, which includes the settlement with the states. That matter has been on appeal for over a year, and recently the Second Circuit Court of Appeals in New York issued a ruling upholding the bankruptcy court's approval of the reorganization plan. We are waiting now to see if there are going to be any further appeals in that matter. That obviously, whether or not there are any further appeals in that matter, will affect the timing of when distributions might start in that settlement. So that's we're just waiting to see what happens. We should know probably within the next 1 to 2 months whether there are going to be further appeals in that matter or whether there are not going to be any further appeals, and the settlement would then go effective sometime soon after that. The bottom line is with the new settlements that have been entered into in the last 6 months or so, the estimated total settlement payments that are projected to flow to the Commonwealth in the aggregate is now up to approximately $1.1 billion over the life of these settlements. The estimated projected total that would flow to the authority from those settlements is approximately $607.9 million. Obviously these are subject to various contingencies that have been discussed, but at this point in time, that represents our best projection and estimates for the amounts that the Commonwealth and the authority will be expected to receive in these settlements going forward over the life of these settlements. And, as I noted, some of these settlements have fairly long tails that extend out 10, 12, 15 years. But that's basically where things stand right now. Happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you for that update. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Bashir? All right, hearing none. Now's the time we're going to move into our public comment period. And this is a portion of the agenda where members of the public may offer comments to the board, and we ask that the speakers keep their comments to 3 minutes or less. Anyone who wishes to speak, please click on the raise hand feature, and you'll be recognized by our moderator, Ms. Musan. We have any speakers?
We do have one raised hand. I'm gonna go ahead and allow her to talk. Hold on. Julie?
Hi there, can you hear me?
We
Yes.
can hear you, Julie. Welcome.
I'm actually not part of the public. I was trying to chat to let you know that Secretary Littell was having some connectivity issues, but I believe Tony McDowell has allowed him in now as a panelist. Is that right?
Hey, Julie, yes, that's right. He and I are texting. He can hear.
Okay.
He's in the car, so if he needs to speak, Mr. Chairman, if Secretary Littell needs to speak, then we'll patch him through my phone.
Okay, thank you guys.
Thanks, Julie. Kara, is there
Okay.
any
No,
other
that-
speakers?
Just her. Let me see. Hold on. We just got another. Whoever just raised their hand, if they could do that again. Here you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Phil North, Chair of the Roanoke Valley Allegheny Regional Commission and also a supervisor on the Roanoke County Board of Supervisors. On behalf of both the Roanoke Valley Allegheny Regional Commission and Roanoke County, we want to thank you for the regional grant for both the city and the county of Roanoke. And we look forward to working with the OAA on future grant applications. Thank you.
Thank you. Kara?
Okay. Nope, there are no more raised hands. So as long as nobody else raises their hand, I think we're good to go.
Perfect. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Kara. So next on our agenda is new business. And as we move into new business, there are several items that will come before the board for consideration. And I think the first we've actually already dealt with, Tony, and that's to adopt the to amend the fiscal year 23 budget and adopt the 24 budget. Am I correct, Tony, in that?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
That's correct.
The next three items pertain to awards recommended by the Grants Committee. And there are a few board members who, out of abundance of caution, have asked to abstain from the discussion or voting on certain individual grants because of a possible conflict of interest. Those potential conflicts have been documented by the members, and that documentation will be attached to the official meetings of this meeting. The first block of potential awards listed on the agenda under attachment A includes those applications for which no member of the board has any conflicts. However, before we proceed, I need to make sure that one item is separate. And I'll ask the board to separate one of the proposed grants from the first block and discuss it separately from the others. Therefore, I'm going to go ahead and make that motion that we separate the proposed Chesapeake and Virginia Beach Cooperative Project Grant, which is recommended in the amount of $3 million from attachment A, so that the board may consider this project separately from the remainder of the block. And I'll make that motion. I'll accept a second if anybody would do so.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion, a second. All in favor say aye.
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 All right, any opposed? Okay, so that motion has been carried forward and that grant is now pulled from the block. And the reason I'm doing that is I sit on this committee as the appointment of the Senate Finance co-chairs, Senator Howe and Senator Barker. And they have sent both myself and Tony a letter that I felt was necessary to make the entire board aware of. And I'm just going to read that letter to you. We received this last week, June 21st. And the letter states, it's come to our attention that a committee for the Opioid Abatement Authority is recommending that Chesapeake Regional Hospital be awarded a grant in the amount of $3 million for a 20-bed psychiatric unit, about 50% of the total cost. As you're aware, an updated budget for this biennium is still under consideration. We want to alert you that this discussion includes a House budget amendment to fully fund the 20-bed psychiatric unit at $6.1 million. In addition, the General Assembly has considered funding this request over several years and ultimately rejected doing so, as it would set a precedent for funding non-state capital costs rather than supporting operating costs, which could be more precisely linked to providing a direct benefit to the Commonwealth. Further, the fact that the Chesapeake Regional Medical Center indicated in their COPN application for the 20-bed unit that it would be funded from reserves has influenced that decision. And of course, they go on to say, we appreciate the important work of the authority and we look forward to future discussions on the opioid abatement and work the work that you are doing to provide improvement for the lives and citizens of the Commonwealth. And it's signed by both, again, co-chairs of Senate Finance, Senator Howe and Senator Barker. So just want to make everybody aware of that. I know there's been some conversations that they also had with Tony and Adam, and just wanted to make, anytime I get any kind of communication from the General Assembly, I want to make sure that the board is aware of that. So that's the item that they obviously have some concern based on the precedent that they've set in the past. So I don't know if anybody on the board would like to make any comments. I know Sarah was the chair of the grants committee. She may have a comment to make on that, or anyone else, but I welcome those comments at this time.
And Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to try to answer any questions that members of the board might have about this item.
All right, well, hearing none, would any of the members of the board like to make a motion regarding that grant?
Hey, Mr. Chairman, I had my hand raised, but
Okay.
real quick question for Tony on that particular grant. So if this grant is voted on by the authority and is awarded, what assurances do we have that that money is actually going to be spent over the life of the grant towards its stated purpose? Do you know, Tony?
Yes, sir. Delegate Ballard, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The grant was seeking a total of $3 million from the OAA to help fund the renovation construction of this 20-bed inpatient behavioral health care unit. And so it's a one-time grant, which means that they want the $3 million and then that's it. They're not asking for any ongoing funding in future years. And as an aside, that's helpful to understand, because if all the grants that this board awards are for ongoing operating expenses, then that creates a big out-year price tag. In some cases, having one-time awards is helpful as we try to balance out what we're spending around the state on different initiatives, different efforts to abate the opioid epidemic. So this is a one-time deal as far as the grant goes. However, if the board chooses to provide this award, then staff has recommended, and it's part of the recommendation that the grants committee has made to the full board, is that the award would be contingent upon 3 key conditions. The first one is that because it's a cooperative agreement, it's not just Chesapeake, it's Chesapeake and Virginia Beach working together. City of Chesapeake would be the fiscal agent, but their actual partnership agreement has to be finalized and signed to the satisfaction of the OAA before funds will be transferred. In addition, they'll have to execute an agreement with the fiscal agent, which would be the City of Chesapeake, and the private partner, which is the hospital, that would guarantee that the facility, the 20-bed inpatient facility, would remain operational for the purposes specified in the grant application for at least 15 years, or funding will be returned to the OAA, with the option at the OAA's discretion that we could accept payment at a rate of depreciation based on the number of years the facility was operating as expected. So in other words, the city really is the agent here. They're administering the funds to the hospital. The hospital and the city would both agree that the facility would be used for the purposes that they applied for, that they listed for at least 15 years, or else we would be able to claw that money back. And then finally, the fiscal agent, again, the city of Chesapeake, would be required to demonstrate that the other sources of funding that would be necessary for this project would also have been secured. So the $3 million represents about half of the cost. They would have to prove to us that have in fact secured the rest of the total cost before we would transmit those funds to them. So Delegate Ballard, I know that's probably a little more than what you asked, but those are the conditions that are recommended to be attached to this award if the board chooses to make the award.
Jason, does that answer your questions? Do you have any more questions for Tony or?
No, Mr. Chairman, no follow-up. Tony, thank you for that.
All
That's
right.
great.
Yep, I think that the sheriff has a question. Sheriff?
Yeah, my question is, and maybe I'm just not as learned as everybody, but the money that they're applying for is to build out a space in a private facility, and I haven't read the grant request to see what it's intended to be used for. Obviously, for opioid abatement, but is there preference to city identified clientele, or is this going to be built out and the clientele is paying the private practice to get services, if I'm saying that correctly, and if you understand what I'm asking?
Tony? Or Sarah, either one?
Yes, sorry, I was on mute. And let me answer the sheriff's question. And then if I may, I've got Secretary Littell on speaker, and he would like to make some comments to the board as well. So the answer to the sheriff's question is, first of all, it's a public hospital. And it does receive public funding already. In fact, this hospital was one of the entities that had to sign a release for the Commonwealth of Virginia to be able to secure the 100% participation under the allocation agreement or the statewide MOU. They had to sign a release not to be involved in the litigation against the companies that settled. And so that's the first part of your question. The second part is they're a public hospital, and so they would make their services available to people who live in the Hampton Roads area. And to the best of my knowledge, that means that you can't turn someone away when they show up at the hospital looking for services based on where they live. And if I may, I've got Secretary Littell on the speakerphone.
That answers my
We'll see
question.
if we can make
Thank you.
Okay,
these
thanks, Sheriff.
technologies work. Secretary?
Yes, thanks, Tony. And Mr. Chairman, I apologize for my technical issues here. Hopefully you can hear me. And I'll just be really brief. I fully appreciate and understand the Senate Finance Chair's perspective. I would note that two things. One, I think the comments that Tony made, I think there's some really good protections in it for the authority and for the use of the funds. This area the Chesapeake area has a real shortage of services available for people with addiction issues and mental health issues. This facility will go a long way towards addressing it for people in the Hampton Roads. And so I think there's great value. I also think as we start our work and make grants, and I think there's sort of you see this in the grants that were recommended, is that we're trying, I think one of the board members, I think Mike Darrell, just saying that, we have the opportunity to learn from things like the tobacco settlement and make sure that the dollars that we give out, have greater value than just the amount that we give out, look for ways that are more creative to get the most bang for it. And I think a lot of what we're trying to do is what I just, use the term little bets, right? We're trying to do a lot of things in many places to see what brings the most value and has the most benefit to the people that we serve. And so I really appreciate the idea that we can have a broad approach to the grants that we make, that they're not all going to be for a specific reason and approach, and that we can consider things like this grant. So I would be in favor of it. I understand that, hopefully there'll be some additional funds in the budget for this, and I think it's an area that is really in great need. So thank you.
Thank you. And Tim, I think Tim Spencer's got his hand up. Go ahead, Tim.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I have one question of Tony, and that is very straightforward. As this letter or any of the other comments that he has heard altered staff's or the administration's recommendation regarding this grant proposal?
No, sir. In fact, I think we made the recommendation to the grants committee. The grants committee has recommended it to the full board. I haven't heard any comments from anyone in our organization about changing those recommendations. I can't speak for the grants committee. I think ultimately the vote that we'll be hearing here shortly will answer your question.
I was just seeking if this altered staff's recommendation in any way.
No, sir, it doesn't. As Secretary Littell said, we appreciate the different perspective that the Senate Finance Committee has to have. I think part of their concern is trying not to, the Senate Finance Committee does not want to create a precedent of funding capital projects at local levels. Because you can imagine they would all of a sudden potentially receive a number of those types of requests when they don't have the assurances about what the facility would be continued to be used for in the future. And so we're not limited by the same constraints that the Senate Finance Committee is limited by. And as I mentioned, we do have assurances in place as to how the facility will be used going forward. And for those reasons, we continue to stand by our recommendation.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Sharon, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Just a very quick question. I just wanted to make sure that I was understanding this right, that there is the potential for additional funding through the General Assembly to support this project, but it would not supplant the OAA funds, or the OAA funds wouldn't. In other words, we won't be duplicating the purpose that what's requested through the General Assembly. Even if the full amount is approved, the project would still need the OAA funds in order to be completed.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I believe that we look at this as what we describe as a blended funding stream. So it would be a combination of Opioid Abatement Authority funding, along with potentially local funding, combined with funding that the General Assembly may be able to provide to the budget. As I think everyone knows, that's currently kind of a source of debate, as well as potentially some federal funds. And so it won't involve supplanting. There won't be any duplication of funding, but they need 6.1 million total. They asked us for 3 million, and that's what we're recommending, but we won't give them the 3 million unless they come up with the remainder or commitments for the remainder as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon. Any other questions from the authority? Go ahead.
Hey, and my question, so it was clear that the use of this was for individuals that live in that locality. Did the grant address the hospital accepting individuals that were high acuity? One of the challenges that we often come across is that hospital systems will accept individuals that are less complex, but the very complex individuals are not accepted. And I would be concerned if we're going down the road of giving a hospital system dollars, of them then not also being beholden to be willing to accept those super complex individuals.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, that is that's a great question. We did not, as part of the staff recommendations, include any specific language that would require that we have a chance to approve their admissions criteria. The recommendation was based on the gaps that exist in that area for these types of services, for the statutory priorities that the board's required to consider, such as the level of harm per capita, the level of community-wide indications of poverty and historically underrepresented groups, the projects that are that have a record of success and that are evidence-based. So those are the areas that that's sort of the lens that we use, because that's what the statute requires in evaluating whether or not these are projects that should move forward and be recommended. I think that your question is a very solid question. We may even have a representative from Chesapeake. Mr. Chairman, I don't know if this would be unusual, but I believe we may have a representative from Chesapeake on the call in the participants window. And if that's the case, there at the chairman's discretion, there could be an opportunity to ask if there's anybody in the audience from Chesapeake that could address that question.
And if they would like to comment and answer Mr. Washington's question, I'm glad to welcome them.
Ms. Mosan, I think Mr. Byrd, Curtis Byrd, is raising his hand.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Executive Director, Committee. Yes, the answer to that question is in our conversations and deliberations with DBHDS, we have put forward what we would consider to be criteria of patients that we can accept. And so, for example, there could be forensic level patients that we would not take. Those would be more appropriate for a different setting. But our plan is that we won't take youth because there is in the planning district the King's Daughters facility that their focus, their expertise is on youth. But we're prepared to take adults, geriatric, to some level medically complex, those with comorbidities and whatnot. So we have no expectation that there would be any significant exclusion of those who would present seeking inpatient and who would need inpatient care. So if you need a little bit more specificity, happy to have someone on the clinical side of the organization perhaps follow up in writing.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, well, hearing none, would any of the members like to make a motion regarding the grant?
Mr. Chairman, this is Jim Holland. I make a motion that we approve the grant as presented.
All right, we have a motion and several seconds to approve the grant. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? And I will abstain. So the motion carries. And thank you, members of the board, for allowing me to pull that out. And now we can continue with our published agenda. And the next item, as we mentioned, is to consider the recommendation of the grants committee to award the FY 23 and 24 grants to the cities and counties is listed in attachment A of this agenda. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. Any discussion on that? All right, hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Next, the board will be asking to consider the recommendation of the grants committee to award FY 24 grants to cities and counties as listed in attachment B of the agenda. Do we have a motion?
I make a motion to accept.
Mr. Chairman.
Somebody has a question. Yes, Mr. Spencer.
Tim Spencer from the city of Roanoke.
Yes, Mr. Spencer.
I will be abstaining pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3112 because of my employment with the city of Roanoke, and that under attachment B, there are two applications filed on behalf of the city.
All right, that has been noted. That abstention has been noted. Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, just for the folks that maybe don't have a copy of the full agenda in front of them, the attachment B lists members of the board who indicated that they want to refrain from any deliberation or voting on this block, and Sheriff Barron asked me to make sure that
thank
since
you.
he's in the car. So the members who are wishing to abstain on this one, I appreciate.
Yes,
Tim
yeah, I will
Spencer.
abstain.
It includes Joe Barron, Sharon Buckman, James Holland, Tim Spencer, and Mr. Washington, because they have some sort of relationship with the organizations and communities that are listed under this block.
Thank you, Tony.
All right, so those abstentions are noted, and they'll be noted, Tony, as well, and they were noted in our agenda. They'll be noted today on this meeting and the minutes forward. Do we have a motion now to approve those, the recommendation of the grants committee?
I'll make that motion.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries, and those abstentions have been noted.
Thank you.
All
Thank you,
right.
Mr. Chairman.
Certainly, thank you, members of the board. These last few votes are historic in that they represent the first full set of awards made by the Opioid Abatement Authority, and we look forward to working with the recipients as they use these awards to save lives and help restore communities that have been devastated by the opioid epidemic. The remaining few items under new business are more administrative in nature, and then this next item, I'll ask the board to consider providing the signatory authority to the executive director to award state agency agreements in accordance with the grants committee motion for FY24. Do I have a motion?
Jim Holland, so moved.
And a second?
Mike Tillum, second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion, or Tony, you want to add anything here?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, thank you. The reason this item appears is that it is our goal to award the funds to state agencies based on decisions made by the grants committee, and to have those funds transferred and ready for the agencies to use in October. This board is not meeting again until November. And so while ordinarily we would want the board to have the opportunity to review those decisions before the awards are made, we feel that time is of the essence to get these awards made. We do have 7 members of the board on the grants committee. And so provided that the grants committee is able to achieve a decision on recommended grants, then this would allow your staff to enter into the actual contract agreements with the agencies that would transfer the funds to them. The other alternative would be to try to pull together an in-person meeting of the full board in September. Wanted to try to avoid that if it was possible.
Does anyone have any questions for Tony? Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And the final item on the agenda is to consider a proposed amendment to the bylaws to adopt a new logo for the Opioid Abatement Authority. And Tony, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we kind of don't really have a logo. The bylaws state that the seal of the authority, if you look at section 1.3 of the bylaws, it says that the state seal, essentially with the year 2021 underneath it, shall be the seal of the authority. I believe this was done as part of a boilerplate of the initial set of bylaws, as opposed to any intent to make that the permanent logo or seal of the authority. As I mentioned earlier in the meeting, we've been working with a marketing, branding, communications company, and they have offered up with our back and forth review 3 options that I wanted to show you. But before I can ask you to select a seal, it's necessary to make an amendment to the bylaw. And so what that requires is a vote of the board to amend the bylaws so that section 1.3 would read that the board of directors shall approve a seal for the authority. And if there's a motion to do that, we can then consider a motion to actually adopt the new seal. So that, Mr. Chairman, the first item would be a motion to amend the bylaws as noted on this slide.
All right, so that, so again, we're a proposed amendment to the bylaws to adopt a new logo for the opioid abatement authority.
I propose to make the amendment as suggested.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second.
Second. Oh,
We have a motion and several seconds. Any discussion? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, if we can go to the next item or to the next slide. These are the 3 finalist designs that the firm and the staff have brought before you for a possible selection. We've labeled them option 1, option 2, and option 3. These are conceptual in that the colors and the fonts can be changed, but we wanted to give you a little bit of a variety to see if there's a pleasure of the board in terms of which to choose from. We kind of like them equally. There's pros and cons of each. I think option 1 would make a better lapel pin than option 2 and option 3. And so for that reason, I would lean slightly towards option 1, but the other 2 are also catchy. And so at this point, Mr. Chairman, if it's okay, I'd just love to hear some feedback from the board and see if there's any appetite in making a selection now rather than waiting until November.
All right, I'll open the floor. Raise your hand and I'll recognize. Okay, Mike, I knew you would have an opinion.
I do have an opinion of this. Cody is right. The first one looks like a better lapel pin, but the color is, can we move colors around here? Something a little more, popish, I don't know. That's an option.
Yes, sir. I would encourage you to kind of focus on the design, and then we can drill down on the right color.
Okay.
One of the things that we liked about the first one, I apologize for the folks that don't have visual in front of them, but there's the image of the Commonwealth, the actual picture of the state, and imposed on it is 2 hands, and one hand is helping the other up, and we kind of liked that imagery. The other 2 evoke sort of the imagery of the mountains and of a rising sun, and so it's a little bit of which we want to tell the board. We want to give you an option, so these are your options.
okay.
Sharon, go ahead.
Thank you. So I agree. I really like option 1. I like that there's an effect with the helping hands of also linking the entire state. So from the Eastern Shore all the way over to the Southwest. And so I think for that reason, especially, I just really like that.
All right, Tim Spencer.
I prefer option 1 with the color of option 2.
All right, we have 3 for
I second that.
All right, the sheriff has seconded.
Yes.
I guess any
And that's
other
all I was raising my hand for was
Perfect. Thank
that
you, Sheriff.
exact same recommendation.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Mr. Chairman, if I could propose that maybe the way the motion could go is the motion's been made to go with option 1 using the colors of option 2 with final approval coming from the chairman once the firm's had a chance to update it.
That sounds great. If you think I'm going to go against the sheriff and Tim, you're crazy. And Mike, and Sharon for that matter. I think more than half the board is on with option 1, changing the colors to option 2. So I'll be glad to accept the mission and final approval, but I think the final approval has already been decided. Any other discussion by anyone else on the authority? All right, we have a motion to adopt option 1 using option 2, granting final approval by the chair. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that, Jim Holland.
Thank you, Mr. Holland. So we have a motion, a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Well, that motion carries, and that's we look forward to being able to wear that on our lapels very soon, Tony. So thank you.
Absolutely.
That basically completes the bulk of our agenda. Do we have any other business that anyone on the authority would like to bring before us today to discuss? I know we have a very healthy calendar still in front of us for this year. And we are all very, very excited about what we did today by getting the money back out into the communities that it's so desperately needed in. Does anyone have any discussion? Anything they want to bring before the board or any new business?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I would like to encourage the members of the board, if there's any way they can attend the November meeting at the homestead, it would really be helpful for us there's a couple things we'd like to do with the whole board, to include potentially getting updated photographs of everybody. We could bring a photographer there for our website and have the chance to have the full board together and in person present for the meeting. That would be fantastic. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments, questions, concerns brought before the board today? Thank you. Okay, Mike. Yes, sir.
Hey, great. Sorry. As you guys know, that I'm like in the aftercare portion of treatment and helping people launch. And that's our sweet spot. And I know we're giving a lot of money out. And my biggest question would be, if I put together a kind of a view on what aftercare looks like in these communities, so that these folks that are finishing treatment going back out into the world have a safe place to go. Recovery residences or center, maybe a workforce learning thing. It's kind of the stuff we do. And if I wrote it up and maybe we could just offer to give it to other people and as an option, because when you give them this money and they put them in treatment, they go back where they come from. We all know, it takes about 8 times in treatment for things to work. Are you guys okay with that? If I come up with like a plan of and just offer it to folks?
Mike, I think we can look at making that part of our abatement academy and our offerings, and I can help you review that to make sure that it's we've got interns here that are working on examples, models, toolkit items, and so we're happy to help you with that.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Tim, I see your hands raised.
Yes, Mike, if you can work that through Tony, I think that gives you, protects you and then gets that information out.
Okay, thank you.
It gives that layer of review through Tony and the staff.
Okay.
But I think it's a wonderful idea.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. And I think all the resources that we can put forth are always great. And I think, like Tony said, there's an opportunity maybe for an intern project there, or for us to include that in some of the things that we have currently going. But yeah, Tim's comments were well received. Thank you, Tim. Any other comments or concerns, questions? Thank you to everyone who's been so active. This is the most active board that I serve on, and I serve on a lot of boards. And your hard work does not go unnoticed. And the benefits of your hard work are just beginning. And I look forward to our next meeting and the many meetings in front of us. But if I hear no other comments from the board today, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, I have a motion to adjourn. Do I hear a second?
Second,
All right, I have a motion to adjourn in a second. Thank you, guys. All in favor, say aye.
aye,
Aye.
Have a great weekend, guys. Thanks so much.
thank you,
You-
aye.
Bye.